We made the decision to buy a sailboat.
We're going to build this sailboat from the ground up with our own two hands.
Because this is going to be a sailing channel, we want to give you a little teaser of what's to come.
And Legos are awesome.
We are going to buy a real sailboat.
Well, but in the future.
There are so many sailing channels out there, and their first video starts with, "We sold our house and bought a sailing vessel."
So nobody's telling us how they actually got there, or at least it's pretty vague.
They always say they simply sold all their stuff. Well, it's a lot more difficult than that. We've been trying to sell all our stuff for 2 years now. Then they happen to own a house, which they sell immediately for the right price. Then they buy a sailboat or retrofit an old one, and then they go sailing around the world.
But how?
As YouTube watchers, we really wanted to know how they got there.
Because many of these channels are pretty vague with their background story, or they don't tell you until episode whatever, or they are trust fund babies, or they're running from the law, or something. We end up giving them and their families a fantastic weird origin story that creates the circumstances to get them to this point.
We also like to make sure there's a little bit of death involved because that makes a much better story.
So it's like there's a fire at the sea park and Julia's parents died, and which drove her to wanting to sail around the world.
It's a very weird place to go on fire. A fire at a sea park? It's the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Now granted, our parents didn't die at a sea park. We are going to show you the steps we are taking to get on a sailboat, even though we're not sure what sailboat it's going to be.
We're going to include our finances because, let's be honest, money does not buy you happiness, but not having it makes the living pretty difficult. We're also going to show you how much all the boaty bits cost.
We're going to include the skills that we feel are important to living on a sailboat. Some large, some small, but all important in how we tackle these problems.
We will also include many things that we think you should learn if you want to take on a sailing adventure. Spoiler: one of the main things you need to know is how to build with Legos, because without Legos, we can't be friends.
The idea of sailing to distant shores is exciting, meeting different cultures, acquiring new skills, and making friends along the way. Even though we have very little sailing experience, join our triumphs and our setbacks on our new adventure.
This channel is to show you guys and document for us the steps we've taken to get from point A to point whatever, buying a sailboat and sailing.
With our current living situation, people keep telling us that we're inspirational, but the truth is we're not inspirational. We are just not afraid of risk. Well, educated risk. The concept of risk becomes easier the more risk you take.
We are possibility seekers that put logic and research into our decisions.
We kind of feel like our lives are being pulled to the ocean. The skills we have been developing over the umpteen years kind of makes the idea of sailing a feasible endeavor.
We are going to lay out all the jobs and experiences that we hope will prepare us to get to the point when we sell our property and buy a boat. No, the initial plan was not to buy a sailboat. The initial plan was to buy a forest and live sustainably in the woods off-grid.
Because everyone needs an origin story. Bruce would have been pretty boring and so unrelatable if he was just a billionaire and decided to fight crime. We need him to fall into a well with bats to give him the fear to overcome, and we really need to kill his parents to give him the angst and the anger to become a crime fighter.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Like all great stories, ours starts simple and escalates quickly. We made some decisions that turned out not to be the correct direction for us. So we are documenting our decisions and the choices we made to figure out what works. Our origin story begins with why we bought forest property in Idaho and moved away from Colorado.
David Bowie said, "If you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little farther into the water than you feel you're capable of being. Go a little bit out of your depth, and when you don't feel your feet quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting."